Thanks for visiting our channel again. Bob Dylan, a god guitarist and prophet wearing sunglasses, stands there, seemingly unmoved by the passage of time. He is an unstoppable poetic warrior who redefined revolt and changed the face of music, according to the Globe. However, when you go under the stage lights, the story takes a sinister turn that a labyrinth of betrayals whispered in backstage corners, broken promises, and destroyed friendships lies beyond the meticulously written lyrics and renowned album covers. This isn't the Bob Dylan you see on album sleeves and in Rolling Stone. This is the Bob Dylan who broke hearts without looking back, who wielded silence as a weapon, and who vanished even though his dedicated fans pleaded with him to remain. And the reality? Messy isn't even close. It's explosive, and it begins before the cheers die down. It all starts with Joan Baez, the woman who once proclaimed him her soulmate. She trusted him with her stage presence, her voice, and her heart, but he vanished just when she needed him the most. What followed was a political, not a personal, hush. Many others thought that Dylan had left behind more than just a romantic interest. The first of many breaks came when he abandoned a cause. Over the years, his romantic life unfurled like a dark maze. Amidst the bustle of city streets, tour buses, and hotel rooms, hushed tales unfolded behind the scenes. Muses and recollections of women emerged. Even the safe haven that one of them, Sarah, had sought to establish following the storm crumbled. A new and unexpected storm arose, this time originating over the Atlantic, right when Dylan appeared to be finding some respite from the mayhem. John Lennon, who was once an ally in the counterculture, became an elusive adversary. Once bound together by a common pulse, urgency, and fire, their once mutual adoration quickly turned into animosity as their visions started to differ. Dylan's obtuse scorn intersected with Lennon's caustic humor. Interviews were viewed by the public as smart jabs. There was, according to those on the inside, an ice fight going on. The once respected rebel titans now regarded each other with heightened distrust. Even the civil rights, anti-war, and counterculture movements that Dylan had helped spark started to feel abandoned as the tension continued. As their prophet, symbol, and unwavering voice, they had anointed him. However, Dylan shuddered. The bewildered campaigners and supporters he had left behind peered into the abyss as he slipped from the role like a snake shedding its skin. Yeah, I guess. However, the original films were the ones that served as the basis for the earliest videos. Or, my personal fave, Little Richard. I just can't help it. Dylan felt stifled by expectation. He didn't merely fight against being categorized. He eradicated the classifications altogether. What seemed like distancing oneself was actually a strategic way out. Dylan, following in the footsteps of his literary hero Rimbaud, opted to disappear rather than fit in. Rather of doing it out of spite, he burned bridges to stay alive. Unannounced, he severed friendships. He let go of different personas like old, faded costumes. Suddenly a stranger, the next a prophet. Plus, it's perpetually just out of reach. The man wasn't fleeing. Rather, he was defying his own narrative by setting fire to the script before its last act could be read. Divergences widened even among friends and allies. After serving as a safe haven for the guy they loved, the band began to distance themselves. What started off as friendship morphed into subtle animosity. Even though they were smiling throughout the final waltz, there were secret cracks between them that would never heal. He assisted them in restoring their sound, but once the spotlight came back on, he stepped into the spotlight while they were left on the sidelines. Word spread about his dominance, his aloofness, and his reluctance to accept responsibility. While the music and camaraderie faded, Dylan once again escaped unnoticed as those around him remained silent. Dylan later reflected on this experience in his songwriting. His every breath in between lyrics reeks of shame, poison, and the reverberations of his suppressed anguish. Unresolved wrath and buried remorse permeate every word of Dylan's songs, turning them into auditory minefields rather than just poetry set to music. Rather than being ballads of closure, these songs sound like unwritten letters, unspoken confrontations, and unacknowledged apologies. When you listen to Idiot Wind, you can hear the roar of a relationship that has been burned to ash with no plans to save what's left. No hidden meaning here. Just open disdain cloaked in music. That's positively 4th Street. It's fine, don't second-guess yourself. That is the opposite of acceptance. It is denial dressed as indifference. The broken promises represented by the bending of the strings and the pauses between the words are what hurt the most. If he sang about them, his friends would know, his lovers would see themselves in the smoke, and his adversaries would hear their defeat etched into vinyl. Rather than being merely musical, these songs serve as arenas for intense feelings. With no priest, no forgiveness, and no end in sight, Dylan transformed his lyrics, his greatest weapon, into a confessional booth, haunted by the people he left behind. After being regenerated in faith and the gospel, Dylan turned around and burned his past once more. He transformed into someone completely different, not merely in terms of his songwriting, but a voice of disillusioned youth. The cryptic poet had vanished. He was replaced by a crazed but resolute preacher who, from the platform, proclaimed salvation like a man possessed. He flat out refused to perform his classic tunes, the ones that made him famous and moved generations. His longtime colleagues were turned off, and his comrades were left in stunned silence, as he instead preached gospel sermons through music. Others remained, either bewildered, loyal, or simply hoping he'd return to his true personality. The audience seemed perplexed. Once praising his secular genius, his former admirers now heard him condemn their same values. He was panned by critics. They abandoned ship after being allies before. As for Dylan, he staked it all. After escaping the pit, he imagined himself born again. Although many perceived it as a form of rejection, it appeared as though the prophet had joined a different cause altogether. He had previously marched for civil rights and denounced war and injustice. One that is heavenly, indeed, but not theirs. Some felt betrayed by the counterculture, while others saw it as a spiritual awakening. His former devotees were shocked, divided, and eventually left behind when the man who had given them protest songs discovered a new God. In spite of this, the return of familiar voices rekindled the heat. Even Patti Smith, who was once considered a potential successor, felt the frost when she joined his orbit. She was dubbed the female Dylan by critics in the late 70s. A rumor had it that the baton had been passed among the fans. Even in a symbolic sense, Bob Dylan was not fond of the thought of being replaced. Even while he spoke highly of himself in interviews, his friends and family perceived a hidden animosity, the kind that builds up rather than explodes. There was a decided lack of teamwork when they were on tour together. Smith went on to say that the atmosphere behind the scenes was icy, tight, and bizarre. Dylan would seem downcast the whole time. He would either utter vague fragments of speech or fall into a deep quiet, as if the atmosphere between them were too thick to hear. Despite their intended shared spaces, she felt uncomfortable there. According to those in the know, he was capable of covert acts of sabotage, frequent set changes at the last minute, technical difficulties that never materialized during his own performances, and a general atmosphere of condescension masked as mentoring. The event devolved into a subtle psychological struggle despite its intended purpose of honoring two generations of lyrical fervor. When asked about being in his presence, Smith compared it to attempting to light a match during a hurricane. After then, he was nothing more than the wind and the stillness. And that stillness, it was anything but tranquil. Like missing lines, it was heavy, powerful, and full of unspoken truths. After Dylan betrayed his admirers, everything fell into place. By the 1800s, Dylan had already begun a downward spiral that extended beyond his creative life and into his spiritual and emotional struggles. The legendary figure who once had the whole country in his grip suddenly appeared as spectral as he took the stage. When he would show up to concerts, he would be unprepared, with faraway eyes and an unpredictable voice. His criticisms were vague and unfocused, rather than clear and beautiful. He played fragmented set lists, frequently changed to the extent that they were unrecognizable, rather than renowned songs. That he reprimanded his listeners and made fun of the music that had propelled him to prophethood. Some people whispered, distorted, or skipped over classics like Blowin' in the Wind. Tears, confusion, and anger flowed from the faces of those who had waited decades to see him. They were booed by several. The divergence between myth and reality was so great that some people decided to walk out in protest. However, Dylan showed no signs of fear, or rather, he chose not to. He didn't always hold the audience in the highest regard. From time to time, it was the prison guard who served as a constant reminder of the person he had been, but did not want to be. During such moments, Dylan lost control, not because he hated them, but because he desperately wanted to break free from their expectations. He exposed his true self to his admirers, daring them to love him for who he was becoming rather than his past self. The truth is that Dylan was never meant to be restrained. Deep down, that he could transform into fire or fog, and the second someone got close enough to see him clearly, he disappeared. He moved like smoke through the air, setting fire to everything in his path, but he never lingered long enough to enjoy the heat. What is the price? It resounded in areas where not even the brightest light could penetrate. It was huge. There was a broken trust behind every masterpiece. Someone in the audience was grieving a betrayal, a broken heart, or a silence that was more powerful than any song for every thunderous applause. Not only did Dylan transform music, but he also left a trail of burnt land and the perplexity of how someone so intelligent could be so distant as he continued to march forward. Though he seldom expressed the realities that may have helped a few, his writings touched millions. While his music was a haven of profound feeling, he frequently discarded the key and shut himself out of his own existence. As a result, we are confronted not only with his legacy, but also with the enduring mystery it poses. Is it possible to upend one's entire life while also crushing the hearts of those closest to you? Bob Dylan didn't only vanish, he vanished into lore. The subsequent quiet wasn't serenity, but rather the reverberation of everyone he had left behind, who must have wondered if they were mere footnotes in his story or the price he had to pay for his brilliance.